Welcome to the CoSN podcast, bringing you timely insights and strategies to succeed in the ever-evolving world of school system technology. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger. Each month, you'll hear from Consortium for School Networking experts, visionary technology leaders, entrepreneurs, and practitioners who will discuss the topics most essential to every school and district technology leader. And now, enjoy today's episode. I'm very excited about this conversation. We're going to be focusing today on the role of the superintendent in leading technology initiatives. For the conversation today, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Donna Wright, Director of Schools, Wilson County Schools, Tennessee, right down the road from me. We were just talking off air. And Dr. David Schuler, he's a superintendent, Township High School District 214, and chair of the CoSN Superintendent Advisory Council. And Donna and David, I'm excited about this because I think that the role of the superintendency in some of these conversations is a bit mysterious to people. Sort of where they originate, how we integrate in the superintendent. Don, I want to start with you. How has it evolved over time when you think about technology initiatives and the role that the different layers of leadership have played?
Well, it's something that I even talked about not too long ago, because it's, when you even look at whether it's administrative training, when you look at the role of even the superintendent, it's not something that would have been on the landscape to have even really made it a part of our toolkit. But it's one that when we look at even how we present instruction as far as the teaching and learning model, technology has become a critical part as far as not only looking at how we can deliver it, how we can support it, but also how we now have the ability to differentiate. We have so many adaptive pieces of technology that we can really drill it down to where it is personalized for individual students. It also becomes a diagnostic piece that years ago I would have loved, if we could have imagined it, would have been so good. Instead of the herd technique is what many times we would see in a classroom. But now we can do the diagnostics and do real-time prescriptive remedies to support instruction in the classroom.
David, how have you seen it change for you just in your own professional development with that feeling of wanting to provide the voice of reason and leadership, yet it's also this feeling of we're building it as we fly, and that there's so many changes to the infrastructure, to the technology, to the innovators that are providing it. How has that impacted you personally when you've thought about communicating a message from a position of leadership?
I think it's a great question, because you have to really weave together this need to continue to stay on the leading edge of technology as it's continuing to reinvent itself, while providing some stability to a teaching staff that's worried that this piece of technology is the new best thing and it's going to be gone in 6 months, so I'm not going to do anything. And so it's this really, I think, creative nurturing that has to take place to have some people try some new things, but not go to scale until you have enough staff on board, and then stick with that for a little while, and then try something else out. And I think it's so significant not to just continue to chase after every flash and new idea out there, but have a plan. And I think from my role as a superintendent, when I started in this, I've been a super for 20 years, love it, best job in the whole world. But it was much more on the technology infrastructure that I was focused on as the leader. And now, if I'm not, from a PD perspective, I'm not growing professionally on how to best meet the needs of every child through the use of technology, I'm not an effective superintendent.
What about when you think about your PD, David, and the identification of the talent that you need with your teams at the district level to take something to closure or to implementation? Because it feels like there have been a lot of changes in roles that professionals have had in districts, because we've had to kind of learn on the fly about how we apply these technologies, the roles, and filling gaps. Has that played a role from a superintendent professional development perspective to say, if I want to take a measured approach to this, I need to be able to communicate effectively, thoughtfully, and with timing as a big component, and identify the groups, the people that need to be a part of it? Because that seems to be where it could fall off the rails. Is that fair?
Very fair. And I think you also have to acknowledge the fact that you don't know it all. Like, part of this is not having such a strong ego that everything is right or wrong. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 24, 48, 36 hours, right? But I have to be ready to be adaptable to meet those needs. And so, we encourage everybody in our district to fail forward. And I've done that. We've changed our, we used to have instructional technology facilitators in all of our buildings. And now we have teaching and learning coaches. It's that same FTE, but we needed to first provide some tools on how to use technology effectively in a classroom. Now we have to embed that in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, have you had that experience where you have to pivot a little bit based on the information you're getting while still maintaining buy-in from staff and leaders at different levels, so that you're sort of running in step with ultimately what teachers and students want to engage with from a technology perspective?
Absolutely, and it's something that not only do you need to be sensitive to it, and when you look at just the breadth of experience among faculty, for one thing, I mean, I have 1,500 certified teachers, and so you're looking at a number of experiences as far as those that are just now coming out of teacher prep programs. They're pretty savvy. They're pretty knowledgeable as far as what's available, and then you have that 20+ year veteran as far as that would still like to put the pencil and paper to the grade book. And so you need to be sensitive that you don't lose some of your most experienced teachers by coming out. And I think Dave said that term, the gadgets, the toys, the things like that, because you have to be very intentional about not only how it's going to be used, but also not where it becomes a reliance as far as that you're going to put a student, a youngster in front of a screen. As far as that, why becomes very intentional. And I have seen, particularly in the last 5 years, as far as we build support, as long as we also make sure that the professional development coincides, and that's just in time to make sure that we don't lose anyone, because you can have all the technology and it can be something that can be ignored as well. If it complicates, it's hard to navigate. You have to remember multiple passwords. And as we have evolved and become more, sophisticated about not only how we present it, but making it friendly for teachers' use, that again, it's not time consuming. And Dave said it well. We've really changed as far as the people we have to support the initiative as well, because all you have to do is have one oops, and it's not working, and I'm not going to use it again. And that's been something I've also seen, that we make sure that we have that support staff there. If something goes wrong, we're talking about it's immediate. You don't have to put a work order in and wait a week. We're going to be there to support, because it only takes one mistake or one breakdown and you've lost them.
Based on what Donna was saying there, Dave, do you think we're at the point where we can better forecast where the gaps might be? I mean, obviously there's been an incredible learning curve over the last decade in trying to get to the point where we're not just having to go back and apologize and sort of recraft messages just so that everybody feels accounted for and that we're addressing whatever that specific issue is, but that we might be at that point where we can do a better job of understanding where the gaps might be and then plan for those gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we all now have, and one of the good things about No Child Left Behind was it allowed us to really focus on data and data points. And so we now know where our gaps are, because we're using data, hopefully, to guide, enhance, and support what's happening in our classrooms, not, as our former state superintendent used to say, a rank and spank system where you're just putting one school above others. And so we definitely have the
I've not heard that, Dave. I
had neither.
I attribute that to Superintendent Tony Smith, a rock star state superintendent we had. But we should be using data to support and enhance our work, and we can identify the gaps if we so choose to, right? Yeah. And I think that's that honest leadership that is necessary for today's superintendent to be able to say, we do have a gap here. Now, what are we going to collectively do about it?
Donna, how does that gap get communicated with boards? I think we're finding also there's sort of an underlying story that boards in public education are starting to evolve and change in their sophistication and kind of understanding the balance between what the community is looking for and what can be provided in support systems. At least that's what I'm hearing anecdotally. How does that communicate to the board and how we integrate them into the conversation and really utilize their skill sets as well?
Well, and that's something that's been another effort on our part, and I'm sure Dave's as well, as far as very deliberate, very intentional, and making sure that there is an understanding as far as not only the work that we're doing, but the how, as far as whether it's looking at student outcomes, looking at performance, and we walk them through and almost on a monthly basis as far as giving a updates, but they also know that in reference to much of what we do, we refer to this data-centric culture that we've created very intentionally. And it's, it goes back to the technology that used appropriately really makes the diagnostic side of it really much easier. And we don't have to guess at it. And we can do pulse points and look at student progress. Well, the very thing that we take our teachers through to make sure that they feel more confident in their own ability to be able to use the technology, whether it's to look at the diagnostics, but also to help them in their instruction. We walk our board through it. Now, does that mean that they all appreciate and understand it? No. There's always, that outlier that, remembers how school was, presented when he was in the classroom, as opposed to looking at all the tools and at the fingertip information that teachers have now. But what we have seen, particularly in the last 2 years, that they can remember, okay, this is where we were. I want to show you the trajectory of where we are. Here are the gaps. What are we doing for those students that, for whatever reason, if it's a missed opportunity or now that we're seeing a very transient population, what is it that we're doing to make sure that we can close those gaps and really give them access to not only the strong support, but move them along as well. So our boards become much more supportive simply because now that we've taken the time that instead of just flashing those numbers up there and where it comes from, but also talking about the technology that they have supported and funded for us and how we're using it. And so it's been an evolution there as well.
I'm glad you brought up that role, that the funding element. So it sounds from what you're saying that there is a role that you play, and I would imagine, Dave, for you too, in educating the board or providing, being a conduit to sort of what's going on, why we need it, right? And sort of elevating all ships rise with the tide in that regard. Have you found that the questions from a board perspective have become, they're coming from a heightened level of understanding, so that they're asking more, they're being more discerning and trying to understand, should we support this initiative or not from a funding perspective? Have you seen that their questions, their engagement has changed as you've really taken a proactive approach to educating them on the data, the processes, sort of the infrastructure needs?
Well, I think it all depends on the board member. I think we have some board members who go to a lot of trainings, who open up their packets the day they get them and pour over everything, and then we have others who may just not have as much time to invest in that work. And so the one thing that I learned from Donna, who is a brilliant superintendent, by the way, is the ability to create a tapestry from data. So instead of us just putting data points on a screen, we're always doing it through telling a story about either students, our journey, that trajectory, so that the board members will know where the gaps exist, but they also are going to leave every conversation about data with some really great salient success points that they can communicate out in the community when they're talking to their neighbors. And that's super important to me and to us. So if the board knows that we're rolling up our sleeves to address the gaps, and they know good things are happening, they'll share the good things that are happening when they talk to their neighbors, and they'll let us continue to do that dirty sausage making work in the buildings.
Donna, so, Dave's looking, he needs a lunch. You're going to provide that lunch. Nice things.
There you go.
You're listening to the CoSN podcast, produced in partnership with MindRocket Media Group. If you're a K-12 EdTech leader, product or service provider, or a school or district leader looking for support with your communications, public relations, social media, and multimedia production efforts, visit mindrocketmediagroup.com to learn how you can work together with the expert team at MindRocket to achieve your goals. How is that? So the tapestry, I love that, just the visual of that, what Dave was talking about in the application of what you've done. How does the staff, so how do the teachers at the classroom level fit into that tapestry? Because it feels like there was that notion, right? There was that storyline of educators being frustrated in their classroom because they were getting technology that was put in where it didn't really feel like they were thought about in the entire sort of ecosystem of what the implication was or was not. If we're talking about the board and creating these relationships where they have a better understanding of data and the role of funding and all these elements, have you found that that has also transpired with educators in that tapestry so that they are more discerning consumers of that technology, and then can be a very valuable asset in communicating whether or not they agree that it should be something that's implemented.
Yes, and and Rod, if you know anything about this state and have been here for any length of time, we're in a very punitive system as far as looking at how, not only based on teacher evaluation, but looking at outcomes. We're moving to a letter grade assigned to schools. So again, when it's a very punitive climate, and it's one that in anything that having to build up not only the teachers that are the ones that are delivering instruction in the classroom, but there's also you having to sort of placate or play down the fear that they have, that what if they don't get the results? What if they don't have the outcomes? Because again, they're paralyzed many times, and I certainly saw it in this district when I first arrived. And I guess that comes back to the storytelling. Technology gives us the ability to create that database as far as knowing at any given time what the progress is per child. And I have used that word tapestry because I tell teachers that no one can tell the narrative better than you can. But you have to make sure that what you're using, whether it's the data points, looking at those formative assessments, being able to change the trajectory and really change the future for any one child. And you can't do that without having the technology base to be able to support what you put into it and looking at that measured outcome. And we've seen some really dramatic based on teachers not only believing it, but being able to support it. And so that in turn, you can take it all the way through the spectrum. That becomes that return on investment, that with educating teachers, knowing how to become a good diagnosticians, and how that they can change that instruction to support the need of maybe one child, maybe a group, whatever it might be, and then looking at those outcomes change. Because I had to make sure that teachers, quit worrying. The thing is, you can control it now because you've got not only the technology, but you've got, as far as a long-range plan, that you can plot it out for every child and create that visual, which then tells the story with the use of data. And that's been something that not only for our board, but also our funding body, because I'm dependent on 25 county commissioners that more or less dictate what kind of funding. And so the story then becomes that based on what you have funded us in the past, here are the outcomes, here's your return on investment. And we're a high-performing district because of being able to build that confidence in our teachers. Don't worry about the summative piece. That's an autopsy. We've already lost the patient if we're waiting at that point. So we're doing that. I keep using that word diagnostics. So if they have the technology, they know how to use it, they can do those pulse points. We don't have to tell them how we lost the patient. We can tell them how we saved the patient. And that's part of that story.
Well, and adding to that, or connecting the story, there's also the student and the parent. And Dave, I'd love to hear sort of your reflections on redefining Ready. And that effort that you had a few years ago, and what you've sort of learned through that process at looking at a young person and their ability to be college and career ready beyond a single score or assessment, to that sort of the punitive environment that Donna was talking about.
Yeah, so it's been an awesome, really movement to refocus everybody's energies on what it means to be a successful student and graduate through Redefining Ready, which is a multi-metric approach, research-based on what it means to be college, career, and life ready. And we've now have 16 states across the country that have incorporated it into their ESSA accountability plan. We're announcing next week that we're going to have our first summer Redefining Ready Academy, where we're going to spend 2.5 days actually in Donna's district doing a deep dive to help onboard new schools and some state officials who are interested in the work, as we continue to grow this movement to actually personalize pathway experiences for every student that meets their needs, their interests, and their aspirations.
Donna, and that's incredible news. I think it's going to yield some pretty compelling results. How do we inform, and what role does the superintendent play in communicating with parents? If I put my parent hat on, and I have young children in the school system here, even though I'm in this space, I find myself still confused at the lack of messaging, or the sort of what feels like incomplete messaging. How do you guard against that, knowing that everybody's human, there's a lot going on, and it's not about some perfection or idyllic sort of messaging that needs to be put out to parents, because we have a responsibility too to be good consumers and supporters of our children. But how do you approach that? How do you understand that? How do the work that you've put in through the years? What lessons have you learned when it comes to communicating technology initiatives to parents?
Well, and it's one of those that you have to balance it, because parents are also reading much of what's out there as well, and the idea of using, not only being good consumers of technology, but then making sure that we also look at that balance as far as the evils that are being presented, as far as too much screen time, as something that takes the place of a textbook. You can add that whole list. And parents, much of what they consume comes off Facebook. I mean, that's where if it's on Facebook, it's got to be true. And there's a lot that's out there that really is worrisome to parents, and absolutely understand it. And so it's not about countering it, but here's what we're looking at. Number one, the use of technology in classroom is a support. It's a resource. It never takes the place of a teacher. It might supplement a textbook. There might not be a textbook. But the thing is that parents can go in at any time. We make sure we have parental access as far as not only to know what's going on in the classroom, but to ask those questions, because sometimes we make it so complicated and complex that parents don't know what to ask. And so we simplify it. We also many times invite parents in to be a participant in their, see what their children are learning. And for example, we've launched a coding initiative starting in the middle school and rolling it up. And we've trained a lot of teachers that normally would not have been coding instructors, but because of their own interests. So we've rolled this out. The next initiative, as far as parents, would you like to learn as well, to see not only what we have the capabilities, but see what your children are learning. Tossed it out there, had no idea that we would have that kind of response. And not only are parents wanting to come in and, as they say, play like their children are, and learn something that's cutting edge and something that's important to the new economy, particularly here in Middle Tennessee. Now we've got community members that I've had a couple say, well, we're taxpayers, so we should have access to this too. So we might have over communicated too much, but the thing is, this is where we get our support. If this is what they're doing in our schools, well, maybe it's something we can all benefit from, because I have to remind, particularly my funding body every now and then, I'm from the old slide rule generation. So that, that sort of dates, where I come from, and I still have my slide rule. And I have to remind some of my favorite curmudgeons that, we have to move along with our kids because they're surpassing us as far as not only access, but being able to think creatively and how it, expands their knowledge base. And so with that, I haven't had a parent yet that did not want to see what's best for their children. When they see the success and the exposure their children have, they become really champions of what we're doing. But you can't leave them out of the equation. You've got to make sure they know not only what their children are being exposed to, but their learning opportunities as well.
Hey, Rod, can I just jump in? One of the things that we did that's super cool is we hosted a Saturday morning conference. We called it our Engage Conference, and we invited parents to come in from all over the community. And it was a conference designed to say, this is how you can support your kids' use of technology. This is what they are going to do. This is what you will never see us asking them to do. So when they say it's a school assignment, call them on it. And so it was like a 5-hour conference. We had different tracks that parents could go to. It was wildly successful. And then we created out of that, we created an online parent university class that was like 6 or 8 different online modules that parents could take at their own time. And it was, again, designed to do the exact same thing. Like, how much screen time is appropriate for a middle school student versus a high school student? This is how you check to see what they may have saved, what photos they have saved. This is how often you should go in and clean out their photos or make them clean it up. And it was a really, we got great feedback from it. And parents just love it. And then when they finish it, they can, print off a little certificate, and, they'll take pictures of it and upload it to Facebook that they just completed their parent university class. And so that's been really, really helpful for us, helping inform parents how to be supportive of their students' use of technology.
So here's what I love. I want to wrap up with a question for each of you. Well, what's compelling, and I hope this is coming through on the audio of the podcast for the CoSN audience, is that when you're answering a question and talking, the other one is writing notes and nodding head going, that's a fantastic idea. And I just love that, because what I was thinking about, I'll start with you, Dave, is that I think it's also important to think about sort of the next generation, right? I think that there are young people that I think our generations are a part of this, which we've historically thought if we're going to work in education, we're either going to sort of manage a building or a classroom. And those are sort of the only two opportunities. And yet the three of us know there's a plethora of opportunity in education for a young person to think about themselves from a career perspective, right? Sort of that redefining of that. And I think the superintendency is a part of that. And there's a real evolution in the talent and the personalities that are driving our districts. And I'm just lucky enough to interact with folks like yourself on a daily basis and see it. But I don't know if the communities really get a chance to understand that and the quality of people that are in these posts. So with all that being said, Dave, when did you because there's a giddiness about you, like you just love what you're doing. Donna's nodding. Like for you, like what was it? At what point, what triggered it in you and you went, this isn't easy, it's challenging, but my goodness, I found it, right? So if you think back when you were a kid and a student and you thought, I don't know, what do I want to do with my career? And you were talking with friends and family, but there's something, you really love what you're doing. Was there a moment where you laid your head down at night and you said, my goodness, I just love my job?
It was about 6 months into my superintendency, and I kind of fell into the superintendency. The board and the superintendent before me had parted ways, and they asked me if I would take over the job. And I said I'd do it, but only for the year, because I wanted to bump back into being a high school principal. And it was about 6 months in, and I just loved having the ability to impact an entire community. And there are few people in a community other than the superintendent, maybe the mayor, smaller towns, maybe a police chief, where the superintendent has the ability to positively impact the future talent workforce, the community and social services, and the quality of the next generation of property taxpayers in that community. And I mean, who wouldn't love to embrace that opportunity? And so everywhere I've been since then, I've been in my third superintendency right now. That's just how I've looked at it. And when you know that you get to create the next generation, holy crap, is that cool?
See, Donna, we're going to let you close on that, follow up on that, because it's the same thing. I mean, again, if people could see it, you are as engaged in what Dave is saying as what you're trying to then share from your expertise in the questions that I'm sort of putting out to you. Did you know all along? I mean, and Dave, obviously, you know, Donna, and this is my first experience, but there's a great balance that I get from you, Donna, in the ability to sort of take up what needs to be done and direct, but to do so in a really thoughtful way. That tapestry piece that you mentioned, Dave, I think really speaks volumes to the approach, Donna, that it looks like you've taken with your work in supporting communities. But when did you realize that this really kind of hit on all of your talents?
Well, I'm one that fell into education sort of serendipitously and also fairly late. However, I'm one that I've been told that I have the ability to motivate people, and something that particularly when educators as a whole have felt pretty downtrodden, they feel like they've lost a lot of respect, which they have, and I support that. The thing is, I have to remind everyone as far as why did we choose this profession? Why are we doing what we're doing? And everyone, and there might be a few, but everyone said that because we love children. And it's much of what even Dave said as far as the effect on the future. And as I share, not only with teachers, they can change the future for one child, they can change the future for many. And I enjoy what I do. I enjoy motivating adults because if you have a highly engaged teacher, one that loves their job, what they can do in the classroom is magical. It's like pixie dust in both pockets. They can make it happen. And there's nothing more powerful than that. And you know, some people get high on some things. I get high on looking at good instruction with kids, particularly the little ones that are highly engaged. But then I'll look at a 17-year-old that would not miss this teacher's class for anything, simply because, number one, they either don't want to let them down, but they just love being in that class. And we see so much of it, but we hear so little about it. And so I am an advocate for our teachers. I can't imagine what it's going to look like if we're not able to keep those committee people in this profession. That's, if anything concerns and worries me, it's that future prospect that we don't have quality educators to fill those classrooms to meet the needs that we have for these wonderful youngsters that we have. And again, you hear about the 1% that you might have trouble with. We forget about the 99% that are, salt of the earth. And that's where I get my joy. That's where after 40 years, I'm still enjoying what I'm doing.
Well, you both bring a lot of infectious energy to it, and I'm sure that people enjoy getting to hear both of you in concert talk about learning from one another and employing these different strategies in your district that sound like your communities respectively are really they're benefiting from your leadership and your humility and transparency in the posts that you hold. And it's been a great pleasure to spend some time and talk about the role of the superintendent in leading technology initiatives. We want to thank Dr. Donna Wright and Dr. David Schuler, and check us out again on another CoSN podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the CoSN podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast apps. You can also listen to each new episode on edcircuit.com or CoSN.org. Follow @CoSN on Twitter for further updates. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger.